Good morning. This is our 7th session of the Appreciation for a System unit. And following up on a lesson from yesterday's foam ball exercise, we had this comment that I made: doing our best is not enough. Deming said, we are being undone by best efforts. A local business lost me as a customer because of best efforts. A carpet cleaning franchise owner packed their operator's schedule for the day without consideration for possible delays. Their concern was to book as many clients in a single day as possible. By the time the crew arrived at my home, they were late, rushed, and apologetic. Their work was barely adequate, certainly not as thorough as I would have liked. They thanked me for bottles of water that I gave them as they zoomed off to their next appointment, also late, thanks to an overzealous scheduler focused only on doing his or her best to ensure no gaps in his or her schedule. By focusing only on doing their best job, it is easy for people to perform that work to the detriment of the customer and the long-term health of the business. When we examine the complexity of our interactions in our organizations, we can ask ourselves, are we like a bowling team where everyone is simply an individual doing their work, completely independent of everyone else, and the organization's outcome is a total of all the scores produced by each individual? Or are we more like a symphony orchestra in which the customer's experience is a result of how we are interacting with each other, sometimes being lead, sometimes working in harmony, sometimes resting? Deming suggests that the levels of complexity and the need for cooperation and coordination in our work is even higher in business and government. Here's an example of best performers not producing the best results. At the time, arguably 3 best players in the NBA went to play for the Miami Heat in 2010. If all they had to do was their best, they should have dominated immediately. But their win-loss record shows that they had to learn how to play together before they could produce a winning season. When we looked at the situation at the Detroit Medical Center, we saw that the accountant was doing their best, but not producing good results for other departments in the hospital. The CEO at first thought he was doing his best to achieve good performance for the hospital, but his best efforts were performed in isolation from the rest of the organization. Deming's point 9 of his 14 points for management: break down barriers between departments. People in research, design, sales, and production must work as a team to foresee problems of production and in use that may be encountered with the product or service. He also said a company could put a top person at every position and be swallowed by a competitor with people have only as good but who are working together. Back to the NBA, in 1989, 1990, and 2004, the bad boys of Detroit showed that a team that knows how to work together can swallow teams with better players. So we have very good work that's being done in your projects and your PDSA cycles. So we're going to focus on discussing better PDSA cycles for learning and improvement. Yesterday, we submitted PDSA questions for our projects. And here are the questions you generated yesterday by producing better PDSA work, and that you identified as your personal top 2. So here's a question: and like you to imagine this. You've been put in charge of a cross-functional team meeting of 7 people in which the team must decide which of these questions to begin to answer first. What will you do in this meeting, and how long will it take? So take a second and sketch a couple notes that you'll share with us about how you'll actually do this, what you'll do, and about how long it will take to decide which one question this team of 7 people who haven't met together before come to decide which one to work on first. Okay, so take a minute and write down an idea or two about how you would do this. How would you approach this challenge? Okay, give me your thoughts. I'll start with Matt. What would you do and how long would it take?
So the first thing that we would have to do is figure out which question is the most important, and that will affect our aim the most.
So how would you do that? So that's actually the question. How would you do that?
Yeah, so I maybe take a vote between everybody.
And how would you vote?
Maybe everyone writes down their opinion on which question is the most important, and then tally everything up to see which gets the most hits, and then go from there.
Okay. And this overall tallying and voting and everything, how long do you think it'll take?
Probably not too long, though. Once everything's tallied, I don't know if everyone will be happy with it, but.
So from start to finish of this meeting, how long would you schedule this meeting for if you're going to say, we're going to pick the top question to address?
Are we then addressing it afterwards?
No,
or
you're
the amount of time.
You're in charge. It's a cross-functional team of 7 people, and you're choosing which of these 15 questions we should be addressing. How long will it take that group of people to do that?
Let's go a half hour.
Half hour, okay. Ben, what's your process for doing this, and how long will it take?
Well, since it's a cross-functional team, everybody would probably have different opinions on which questions to answer. So I'd probably just go ahead and make the decision to pick whichever question
now that's
would actually be good for a committee, and we would actually get some value out of having everybody involved for. So it'd be a pretty quick, maybe
actually
10 minutes.
This is the team has to pick. So that's the challenge that you're being asked to. How do you have the team select which is the top one we address?
Oh, well, in that case, I'd probably just filter it down to a few questions.
No, we have 15 questions. So the challenge is what's on the screen here, and how do you get a team of 7 people to select? That's what we're asking. Is, we're not modifying the conditions that we're dealing with here. We're saying these are the conditions. What would we do with these conditions, and then how long would it take?
All right, then we'd vote. So pretty similar to Matt's answer.
Okay, and then how long?
Probably take just as long, so about half an hour.
Half an hour, okay. All right, Michael.
I guess going off of how that was explained, could modify the who would I get help from to who could help in the team, and then we could really talk about what everyone has to offer, and then I guess go from there. So it'd take about 10 minutes to get everyone's opinions, I guess.
10 minutes to get everyone's opinions about all 15 questions?
Yeah, pretty much. Or just bring up, I guess, each question and receive or narrow it down, kind of like we did with the 7 questions, to just a few which they think the best, and then kind of go from there.
All right. And how long is that that taking to go through all 15 questions, have people identify and share what their top one is?
I'd say, I guess 15 minutes to do it
15
individually
minutes.
and then share it.
All right. Andrea, what's your process? You're in charge of a cross-functional team meeting. You've got 7 people in it. You've got these 15 questions to decide what's the first one we work on.
So my process was kind of similar to Michael's, where I thought I should get the opinions of everyone in the room on which question we could most easily address, like right away, like right now, like what's priority number 1. And then I thought it would be important to ask everyone, like, okay, what are we trying to solve? Like, who's involved? What resources do we have available? So kind of modifying some of the questions on there.
Yeah, we're not modifying any of the questions.
And
We're
then,
selecting what's the first
going
one.
forward with whatever.
Yeah, so that's interesting. So
Okay.
when we look at, so if we have 7 people and they're all sharing their opinion about 15 questions, I think we're underestimating how long it might take for people to walk through that process. You guys are being very generous with the willingness of the team to listen to each other, as well as to be quick in their explanations of why they like each of the 15 questions and which one is the best one. So half hour, that's like the what I'm hearing. However, Andrea, when you suggested your process, I'm hearing much longer than a half hour to walk through that whole sequence, which is fine. So now we're gonna follow a different kind of process. I'm going to introduce you to multi-voting. Every person receives a certain number of votes. And the number of votes is equal to about the total number of items to consider. If you guys watched the shopping cart video, you had an opportunity to see how that multi-voting took place in a quick fashion with dozens and dozens of possible ideas to select from. And today, that total will be 5 votes. So each of you have 5 votes to distribute across these 15 questions. And you can distribute your votes as you wish, meaning you can vote once for 5 different items, or you could put 5 votes on one item. So that's a way of weighting the questions that you think are the most important to address. And then we'll tally the votes. And then today we'll begin group work on the question that receives the most votes. So we'll actually begin some group work today. So as you look at your list, we have 2 types of questions that people have asked when you submitted your questions. So the assignment was about, how do I improve my PDSA work? And some of those questions came in about PDSA work in general. And then there's also specific questions about what my project is attempting to answer. So for those B-type questions that you see on your list, please try and relate and apply what is being asked to PDSA work in general. So if you can generalize that question to something could be related to a process or organizational kind of question, think about it that way. Don't think that just because it's asking something specific and that's not my process, that it may not be worth considering, okay? So again, you're gonna have 5 votes to distribute across all of these questions. And I'm gonna let you tally, let me know your vote tallies on this, okay? So I'm gonna go down the list, and you can tell me which question you want to put a vote in. So I'm going to start with Andrea. And you can tell me which question and then how many votes. So starting from the top and going from 1 to 15. What's a question and how many votes? So Andrea?
I would give number 1 5 votes.
So all your votes are going there. So you're done voting. Okay. Ben.
I guess I would give votes to question 1, just 1 vote.
1 vote.
1 vote to 3A, 1 vote to 5, 1 vote to 6, and then 1 vote to 9.
Okay, good. Matt.
I will give 2 votes to 1. Let's go 2 votes to 9. And then I will give 1 vote to 11.
Okay, Michael.
I'll do 2 for 1. And then 1 for 3A, 1 for 4.
Oops. Sorry, let me do 1 for 3A. I'm sorry, 1 for 4.
And then 1 for 5.
1 for 5. All right. So we're going to sort these. All right. So we picked number 1. So how long did that take for voting?
Not long.
Not long. It was probably, it might have been a minute each person, right? So there we have it. So if in multi-voting, that's one of the process methodologies you can use in a team meeting. You can include everybody's contribution. You don't have to exclude anybody. You don't have to make a decision beforehand. And you can say, what is your preference for what we work on? And immediately we have an answer. So in our case, we've got out of 15, well, 16 items really. So there we have our responses. Now, question number 1. So now we have our question. How might we answer? How do I create more achievable PDSA cycles? In other words, what is the normal amount of time to spend on each one? So now if we're addressing this and we have someone who's asking us how to do this, here's some ideas that we want to think about. First of all, we don't want to solve the problem, but we want to provide a path for how to approach the question. Now, if we did that, if we don't want to solve the problem for somebody, how do we have them start to learn on their own? How do I create achievable PDSA cycles, or what's the normal amount of time to spend on each one? How would we begin to answer that question? What are some possible approaches to this?
You could help them edit one that they've already made.
Yeah, we could edit one they've already made. So what do you mean by that?
I guess, I mean, like go through like points that they're questioning or that they're not sure about or that they think aren't achievable in their PDSA cycle.
Okay. So yeah, so one thing we might ask ourselves is, what do we mean by achievable, so we can help edit them in that direction? Ben, I think, was this your drafted question? Did you draft this one?
Yep.
Yeah, so say more about what you mean by achievable, and what do you mean by what's a normal amount of time to spend on each one?
Well, each of my PDSA cycles so far, I think I've started off too broad because I don't think I've had time to actually finish one to the extent that I kind of set out to do. So that's where this question really came from.
Yeah. So one of the things we might look at is, and that's an element of what Andrea is suggesting, is let's look at a current PDSA cycle and maybe help edit that. So when we look at, well, what's going on today, that's one way to approach it, is don't solve the problem, but provide a path So if we're looking at providing the path, when we say that, well, part of it is, well, what's our current situation? We've got PDSA cycles that might be taking too long. So why are they taking too long? Now, in your case, what do you think might be one of the issues that for why they might be taking so long, or you're not completing them in the space of a week?
I mean, they're probably just not focused enough. I'm trying to do too much on each cycle rather than doing a little piece of it each time.
Yeah, that could be the case. On each of your PDSAs, you list 3 different rooms you're working with. You have an option to cut that down to 1 room. And it might be that you're trying to do multiple things in all 3 rooms. So there might be a way of beginning to say, well, what's something, can I reduce the scope of what I'm doing? Right. So when we're looking for more achievable PDSA cycles, did we have any examples that I shared previously about amount of time to spend on each one? Remember the example of people going from the production area to the warehouse and back again? In that example, when we ran our first PDSA cycles, how many did we run in one day? Matt, do you remember?
I want to say it was like 4 or something like that.
Yeah, that's generous. It was 3, but
It was close.
yeah, it was very good. Yeah. And why were we able to run 3 PDSA cycles in that period of time? Michael, do you remember?
I'm not too sure.
How about Andrea? Do you remember?
I don't remember.
Yeah, so we had this problem of people going to the warehouse to find parts for themselves. And we said, well, why don't you let's test what would happen if you had to order a part. Now, when we tested ordering a part, did we test the entire cycle of order a part, pick it, deliver it, return it to the production area? What did we do? What did we test? Ben, do you remember?
Did we test each part of the process individually?
We did. The very first step was, can you actually order a part? That was the very first step, order the part. And how did we do that? We said, show us the form that you use. Can you order a part you need using the form? And we found out immediately that they couldn't even do step number 1 of the process. So part of doing achievable PDSA cycles and scoping it correctly is a way of going back to your process, your deployment flow chart, and what's the very first step, and can I test something in that says that's I want to produce an improvement here, and then work your way through that. Scoping it, like you talked about, Ben, you said maybe my scope is a little bit too big. That's one way to scope it, is go back to what's the step by step of what I'm trying to accomplish. And then also work to provide answers that may apply more to this than this specific situation. So that's what we just did. We said, it's not just the work that you're doing, Ben, in trying to be able to catalog and locate all the items in your rooms, but what's the generic approach to applying this to other PDSA cycles as well? And we just went through some of that. Is how do we provide answers that allow us to reduce the time it takes? So there's a mantra. There's a mantra that I keep saying all the time. What's the question I ask ourselves about PDSA cycles that we want to run and learn from?
Like, what's something you can do today?
Exactly. You should write this down. So everybody write this down on some pad that puts next to your monitor, wherever you look at it on your wall. What's a PDSA cycle I can run and learn from today or even this afternoon? Remember, PDSA cycles are not designed to complete your entire project. They're designed to help you learn how to do elements of your project better. And so one of the things we're trying to do is, how can you help the person asking the question answer the question for themselves? So there's a variety of questions that were asked on our forums where we would go back and say, well, let's look at, who would you ask? How could you find that out? Andrea, you had several about, who do I ask for this, or who does this or that? Give us a couple examples of questions that you asked like that.
I think I had like who or what departments are involved, like when we order equipment.
Yeah, so let's stop with that one. What departments are involved when you order equipment? Well, how would you find that out?
I could order something. I don't know.
Who has a suggestion for Andrea? Like, how would you find out who's involved in ordering equipment?
Maybe you just ask around.
That's an excellent starting point. And there's a couple things to ask. You could ask, how do I order equipment? And what's another question you could ask? Who's involved in ordering equipment? I mean, it's those kind of, when you ask around, Ben, who would be the first person you would go to if you were asking that kind of question?
I'd probably go to my boss.
Yeah, that's a very good starting point. Hey, boss, I'm looking for information about how we order equipment around here, or who's involved in that process. Can you help me out? And it might be, I don't know, but I would ask, might be one of the answers. I would ask so-and-so, or it might be, this is the person who's involved, or this is the department that's involved. So something like that. So one of the things this is how you go about learning almost anything. When I first was assigned to be a quality advisor at EDS People Systems Division, someone said, you should learn something about Dr. Deming. I had never heard of him. I didn't know his work. Somebody said, he's done work with a variety of companies. One of the companies he's worked with is Gallery Furniture down in Dallas. So I just got on the phone and called Gallery Furniture, talked to the first salesperson and said, tell me about what it's like to work in an organization that's using Deming's approach to doing business. It was just that simple. Get on the phone and ask people, what are you doing? What's different? How do you like it? Is there a before after, that happened? And I learned a lot from that conversation, and it convinced me that, oh, this is worth learning about. It's worth learning and getting engaged with Deming's work. And I was just simply asking and finding out, who do I ask? Who's doing this? If you're going to do improvement work, you're to want to not only be curious, but also be willing to ask questions. Part of the practice that we get with our teach to learn conversations is making requests of other people to actually talk to us. Sometimes we want to talk to them about a topic we want to teach them. Sometimes we want to talk to people about a topic we are interested in learning more about. It's the only way we're going to figure stuff out. And we want to continue engaging people around us and making sure that they're participating. Because oftentimes when you ask people for their advice, they get engaged, they become a supporter of what you're doing, especially if you integrate their ideas into your work. Often people want to contribute. When you're looking for advice, sometimes they volunteer. Other times they say, talk to so-and-so. But that's one of the things you want to be focused on. How might we answer these kind of questions? So we had a variety of things. I wonder if this also approach works. Let's see, let's go back. Let's grab this. These list of questions, the answers might actually provide a response to this question. Limit the scope by asking smaller questions. Make a list of what the project is supposed to contribute, ID the jobs to be done. What's the learning goal? Now, remember, each PDSA cycle is not to be the solution goal, but it's supposed to be a learning goal for that one particular step. So when we had 3 PDSA cycles in the space of a day, we had very, very small learning goals. You know, can you order a part? Can you interpret the order? Can you go find the part? Those are the 3 basic steps that we did immediately that are not anywhere near the total solution that we ended up coming up with. And of course, what's a test you can run and learn from today? And where do you have authority or flexibility to change something? So sometimes your flexibility is only in providing something for somebody to look at and respond to, or somebody to try a process, those kind of things. This is a world where there's no definite how-to. There's a methodology, and there's an approach and a thought process. Each PDSA cycle is going to have its own different challenges, and there's certain things. That's why we have the PDSA form. When you follow the form and fill it out, it helps you begin to think in a way that makes sure that you're learning and actually producing improvement on purpose. The intention of the form is not that you begin to use the form forever for the rest of your life, but to begin to practice and get into the mental habit of asking and answering those questions and dealing with them in a way that produces learning so that you produce improvement. Now, one of the other questions that comes up is, when we say you must move to improve, what are different types of moves? I've been asked this several times. So here's some examples of moves that we've actually done or have occurred in real life. To improve something, you have to must move something. So here's some move examples. This is famous. Wash hands after performing an autopsy and before delivering a baby. I don't know if anybody's heard of this story. Matt, are you smiling at this? Have you heard this story?
Yeah, I've heard it before.
Yeah, it's famous. You know, there's certain doctors that were having experiences of mothers delivering babies dying from infection, and they had a hard time believing that they were the cause of the infection. They thought something else was happening. But when somebody studied the process, actually did a let's go find out kind of conversation, let's go see, they realized that people were moving straight from running an autopsy to delivering a baby. And at the time, hand washing was not a standard practice. There wasn't seen to be a need for it. Now we understand why there is. Assign 2 people to work on small IT projects. We had a large division in UTC, United Technologies Corporation, Fire and Security, that had very large IT projects going on, and we could not get our small IT projects done because they're always stuck behind larger projects, kind of like being stuck behind a semi-trailer on a 2-lane highway. We asked the department head, will you please assign 2 people to these smaller projects? So we kind of moved the big project off to the side. We had smaller projects that now had 2 people, and we could run our small projects through, and there wasn't that much slowdown for the bigger projects that occurred. And we made much more progress on our smaller projects throughout the organization. There's other ways of assigning resources, not just IT, that help speed up work. This example happened in a facility that made hoses. Everybody had knives in the facility. We were seeing injuries. We took away knives from everybody, but we had to add safe cutting tools where needed. That was an improvement in the injury rate. We also reduced back injuries in a facility in Great Britain by keeping the hose coils on the same plane throughout test and fastening. People were lifting and putting down and picking up these large, heavy coils of hose and doing damage to themselves. Place all financial departments into 2 standard folder structures, one for monthly data, one for annual data. So when we did a 5S on the financial department's documents, this is one of the processes they came up with, and it made it much easier to move from month to month and from year to year. We created mobile parts kits to supply a work area and to function as Kanban signals for restocking. So the work needed to perform a particular task, all the parts and tools needed were on a kit. We wheeled it out to the area, and when they were done doing the 10 items for the day, they could wheel it back and get a new kit. And so everything was on the rack, and it was very easy to see what was needed for restocking. When we were doing improvement activities in the manufacturing area, we included, so the move was put all these people together rather than make decisions by one leader and then tell people what to do. This is famous. ATM cards are now returned before dispensing cash. There's no more abandoned ATM cards because your card comes back to you before you get your cash out. Meetings can be improved by moving the 3 basic questions to the start of the meeting agenda. You can separate frequently used parts from rarely used parts in the warehouse, and that means that everything's in the strike zone that you want to get to, so it's easy to reach. Eliminate shelving that requires a ladder. Maybe you guys aren't dealing with that kind of work area. Change the work cell shape to U-shaped instead of a straight line. When you do a U-shape, it's a lot more efficient for operator movement. Standard work in process controls the flow of parts. I think I described that one time. Change the height of the work area to reduce strain. When I went to the Toyota facility, the manufacturing line was designed so that the people doing the installation of whatever part, the vehicle height moved depending on where the worker had to do the work. So there was less strain for the worker. And so they designed the workflow so that it worked for the people doing the work and not the flow of the vehicle. Create test cases before writing code. This is a really good practice. And then place warehouse phone extension on all shop phones. This is part of our long-term process that we implemented once we got the water spider, or the person that was carrying parts back and forth. It was very easy to reach that person now that they had the extension on any single shop. So now, how might you advise yourself on how to answer? So return to your own list and your own top 2 questions and pretend that you're giving yourself advice on how would I answer that? What are the things that I would do if someone were asking me that question? How would I make recommendations to them? How would I advise myself? You might actually consider that as part of your conversation with your Teach to Learn topic today. Teach today's concept, which includes multi-voting, but isn't limited to multi-voting. Add to your theory of knowledge mind map, and please make progress on your PDSA cycle. So how do we make better PDSA cycles for learning and improvement? It includes not only addressing questions, asking people, having curiosity, but also making moves to improve. So testing small little moves that I can learn from today. Our quotes for today. This is from Michael Twitty. Often people attribute this to Deming, but he's quoting Michael Twitty. Management is prediction. And then from Ed Baker, he wrote the book, The Symphony of Profound Knowledge. The mind and experience are inseparable and influence each other. So thank you very much for your contributions. I appreciate the questions you submitted and your willingness to talk about them and make an approach for how do we address them, and then participate in multi-voting today. I hope you have a good day. Please be in communication if you have any questions, and I will see you all tomorrow.
See ya.
Thank you.
Thanks, Eric.